Hello, everyone. Welcome to 4.2. Today we are listing the traditional endocrine glands, identifying the hormones produced by each gland and their associated function. Yes and no. I am going to talk about the endocrine glands, but we are going to go over the main hormones and their functions, but we're not going to dive deeply into it. This is not a nursing program. You do need to know what the main ones are, and we're definitely going to cover them, but we're not going to cover all of them, and we're not going to cover every function because your eyes will glaze over long before I'm even halfway done. So let us begin. There are three types of hormones. The amines or amines are simple molecules. Proteins and peptides are chains of amino acids. And steroids are derived from cholesterol. All right. So that is what these hormones are made of on a molecular level. So let's talk about the hypothalamus real quick. The hypothalamus is considered part of the nervous system, but also produces and releases hormones and thus can be considered a neuroendocrine organ. It's part of the endocrine system, part of the nervous system, so it is a neuroendocrine organ. The hypothalamus is the link in the body, mind, and nerve endocrine function. It is what combines your thoughts, your brain to the rest of your body. The hypothalamus exerts its primary influence over the pituitary gland, which in turn controls other endocrine glands with tropic hormones. Tropic or trophic hormones cause secretions of other hormones. It's kind of like the middleman chemical. You need the workers to do something, the CEO says to do it. Well, here comes the tropic hormones, which is the manager over the laborers that actually do it. They say, hey, you need to go work harder. And then the hormones work harder. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is something that you should be moderately aware of. When a series of glands signal each other in a sequence, it is called an axis. That is a word that you need to know for your MBLEX. An axis is when a series of glands signal each other, all right, in a sequence. They're doing it in order. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is our central response system. The hypothalamus is like, oh, what's happening? And then it sends information to the pituitary gland that goes, oh, I need to manage these. Workers work harder. And then the workers tell the adrenals, oh, produce cortisol and make this person extremely stressed. That's what happens. The hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland, which then signals to the adrenals. And we're going to talk about the adrenals and cortisol in more detail in just a moment. You are more than welcome to pause this to read this page, look at this table, but I will talk about these things in detail in just a moment. So, other endocrine tissues. Endocrine glands are not the only tissues in the body that secrete hormones. Surprise, surprise. There are cells and tissues in your brain, in your gut, and in your cardiovascular system that all produce hormones. So does your fat, which is absolutely fascinating to me. Research indicates that gut bacteria, the microbes in your body, can produce and secrete hormones. All right. The crosstalk between these microbes and hormones secreted by actual organs and tissues of your body affect host, meaning you are the host to this bacteria. It affects your metabolism, your immunity, and your behavior. It also exerts control over the HPA axis that we just talked about, that hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis. All right. The microbiota produces and secretes hormones, responds to the host hormones, and regulates the levels of expression of the host hormones. The biochemical complexity of the gut microbiota and many of the hormones produced by the microbiota are also neurotransmitters in the central nervous system. All right. Another cool thing, adipose tissue is an endocrine tissue. All right. It secretes hundreds of hormone substances, hundreds of them. Um, it is absolutely fascinating. I have provided a separate video for you guys about fat being an endocrine organ. This is just mind-blowing. What can happen in the adipose tissue. Now, one of the things that it does control quite a bit of is leptin. Now, leptin controls body weight and metabolism from the hypothalamic centers in the brain. So, the hypothalamus again, when levels of leptin in the hypothalamus are low as a result of leptin resistance, which can happen in cases of obesity, food cravings and weight gain occur because the body believes that it is hungry and goes into a state of continued fat storage. So you begin to start this horrible cycle of the extra adipose causing leptin resistance, which causes the buildup of extra adipose. All right, the pituitary gland. This thing is really cool. It is a major control center. The pituitary gland, or the hypophysis, is located in the head at about eye level. All right. It hangs down from the hypothalamus and sits in the sella turcica. All right. That's a recessed area in your sphenoid bone. It's about the size of a peanut. The pituitary gland has an anterior lobe and a posterior lobe. The posterior lobe is not a true endocrine gland because it only stores and releases hormones, but it doesn't synthesize them. It doesn't actually make them. Only the anterior lobe does. All right. The pituitary gland is the main source of tropic hormones. Again, those are hormones that have a stimulating effect on other endocrine glands. We're like, hey, you have to go get working. You have to go. It secretes 7 major hormones on its own, though. The posterior lobe doesn't make any, but it does secrete 2 major hormones, and we'll talk about those. So the anterior pituitary hormones include growth hormone, which is somatotropin. All right, that stimulates most body cells to increase in size and divide. This targets organs. The target organs are bones and muscles. All right, I always use the example of you've been tearing up your muscles in the gym trying to get big. It's actually growth hormone that builds them back and makes them hypertrophic. It makes them bigger as they grow while you sleep. All right, it also repairs and rebuilds tissue. Things such as wound healing has part to do with growth hormone. Growth hormone release can be inhibited by emotional deprivation. All right. So if you feel really bad, you're having emotional disturbances, growth hormone is affected. If you have excessive blood sugar and high blood fat levels, that also affects the growth hormone levels. Disruption in sleep pattern interferes with growth hormone function as well, because that gets activated while you're sleeping. Thyroid stimulating hormone is a tropic hormone that promotes and maintains the growth and development of the thyroid gland and controls the release of thyroid hormones in a negative feedback system. Remember, your thyroid is responsible for a ton of your metabolic functions. So your metabolism is being controlled by the thyroid, which is being directed by the pituitary through the thyroid stimulating hormone, the TSH. Adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, is a hormone that promotes and maintains normal growth and development of the adrenal cortex by stimulating the release of glucocorticoids and androgens. Androgens are hormones like testosterone that produce secondary male characteristics. Follicle stimulating hormone is a tropic hormone in the female that stimulates the growth and maturation of ovarian follicles, which contain your eggs. FSH also stimulates the secretion of estrogen in females and in males. And in the male, it stimulates sperm production. Luteinizing hormone is a tropic hormone that causes ovulation, the release of the mature egg from the follicle. It stimulates progesterone production in the ovaries. And in men, luteinizing hormone stimulates the production and secretion of testosterone in the testes. Prolactin is found in both men and women, but primarily has a stronger effect in women. It plays a part in breast development, and it also initiates milk production when stimulated by the central nervous system. You may have recalled from our other assignment that prolactin helps with milk letdown, but oxytocin and stuff also play a role in all of this. Receptors for prolactin in lymphocytes suggest that prolactin is also involved in immune function. We don't have a lot of research about that yet, but it's pretty cool. Melanocyte stimulating hormone acts on the pigment cells in the skins and adrenal glands. There's not a whole lot of research about these, but we do believe that these have something to do with skin darkening, as in tanning. Now, posterior pituitary hormones, antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Oxytocin stimulates smooth muscle contraction, especially in the uterus. A woman has a big dump of it right before giving birth. And that's part of a positive feedback cycle. When the child is born, it stops. Pitocin is a synthetic oxytocin used mainly to induce labor in women. And oxytocin stimulates the milk letdown response. Remember, we just talked about that with prolactin, which causes the breast ducts to contract and release milk. Oxytocin may be implicated in bonding behavior or feelings of belonging to another, as occurs between a parent and a child. The role of this hormone in men has been suggested to be a support pair bonding in couples and enhance parental behavior. It is the feel good love chemical. It will make you attached to people. The more oxytocin that you share with someone, the more you actually become emotionally attached to them because you are becoming chemically attached to them. There's also antidiuretic hormone known as vasopressin, vasopressin, tomato. The antidiuretic hormone stimulates the kidneys to remove water from urine and release it into the bloodstream. All right. Release of this is stimulated by pain, anxiety, nicotine, tranquilizers, and low blood pressure. The more we can increase the water pressure in the body, it increases the blood pressure, right? It's all turgor pressure. So this antidiuretic hormone would kick into gear if you're having low blood pressure to pump up that pressure by having more water in your tubes, so to speak. The thyroid gland. It lies on the trachea below the thyroid cartilage and consists of a right and left lobe connected by a bridge called the isthmus. It looks like a little butterfly in there. The thyroid gland regulates metabolism in the body by maintaining an adequate amount of oxygen consumption at the cellular level, which is pretty cool. The parathyroids, as you can see in this picture, they look like little polka dots on this little bow tie that he's wearing. The parathyroid glands are made up of 4 round pea-sized bodies located on the posterior surface of the thyroid lobes. Their hormone, parathormone, when combined with vitamin D, reduces the amount of calcium excreted, causes the release of calcium from bone, and absorbs more calcium from the gastrointestinal tract, resulting in an increase in blood levels of calcium and phosphorus. The pancreas. The pancreas is pretty cool. Not mentioned here, but the pancreas it is mentioned in here. I was going to tell you anyway. It is both considered an endocrine and an exocrine gland. I didn't know if I had included it on this slide or not. The pancreas is considered both. It does absolutely help with blood sugar levels, with blood glucose levels, by transporting glucose into cells to be used for energy. Your pancreas is involved with insulin production. All right. We're going to talk about the 2 main hormones of the pancreas here in just a moment. Insulin. It releases insulin when levels of blood sugar, amino acids, and fatty acids rise. When you release the insulin, your blood sugar levels lower. All right. It allows the demand for energy to increase and to burn this up. Glucagon is released when the blood sugar is too low, and this increases blood glucose, which is the opposite of the insulin response. Adrenal glands. We have two adrenal glands, one on top of each of our kidneys, and each gland consists of an inner portion called the medulla and an outer layer called the cortex. Look at them. They're like little brain caps on top of the kidneys. They secrete cortisol, aldosterone, and gonadotropins. So cortisol is the major chemical that you're going to hear about associated with the adrenals. Cortisol is secreted in minute amounts. It doesn't feel that way. If the body does not have sufficient supplies of fat or glycogen stored and used for energy, cortisol synthesizes certain amino acids into glucose. This is gluconeogenesis, causing a rise in blood sugar. Cortisol also converts starches into glycogen in the liver if the body does not acquire enough carbohydrates to use. Right? Eating and activity stimulate cortisol secretion. Cortisol also seems to follow daily biological rhythms, and it increases sharply when you wake in the morning. All right. Cortisol slows wound healing, though, because of a decreased rate of connective tissue regeneration. Excessively high levels of cortisol, especially over a long period, can cause symptoms such as a decrease in cartilage and bone formation, inhibition of the inflammatory response, which reduces normal signals for tissue repair, depression of the activity of the immune system, increase in fat storage in adipose tissue, depression of brain activity, and promotion of detrimental changes in cardiovascular, neural, and GI function. What are all those words meaning? It means that stress will mess your body up. Cortisol is what's considered to be the stress hormone. All right. It is the hormone released when your sympathetic nervous system is heightened, and boom, you have depression of the immune system, depression of brain activity, increase in fat storage. It just goes downhill from there. Aldosterone is a mineralocorticoid, a sodium and potassium regulating steroid. Aldosterone causes the kidneys to reabsorb more sodium and water and excrete more potassium and hydrogen. Gonadotropins. All right. So, although the ovaries and testes produce most of the sex hormones in the body, the adrenal glands also produce similar male and female sex steroids called gonadotropins. Both sexes secrete estrogen, progesterone, and male androgens, with androgens predominating. All right. This hormone secretion is significant in the fetus and during early puberty. The effect of the adrenal sex hormones increases as we age, and hormone production in the gonads decreases. So, this means that postmenopausal women might use adrenal estrogen when ovarian function decreases. So, when you go into menopause and your ovaries sort of stop producing that estrogen, which is important for multiple functions, including your cardiovascular health, believe it or not, as well as remember production of with calcium building and whatnot in the bones. That lack of estrogen can lead to osteoporosis as the bones begin to break down and there's not as much buildup left anymore after menopause. So women may start to rely on the adrenals to start producing some of that estrogen to help them. The testes and ovaries. The male and female gonads are located in the pelvic cavity and produce sex hormones identical to those of the adrenal cortex. Um, Estrogen, progesterone, and androgens affect epithelial and connective tissue and circulation. All right. Testosterone is known to influence hair growth and distribution of hair in men and women, but also affects the skin and is a factor in acne development. So, women that have things like polycystic ovarian syndrome, where they have less estrogen production, but they do have increased testosterone production, you'll normally see a beard, sometimes a mustache, very often like a goatee pattern that's growing, because the PCOS, increase in testosterone and decrease in estrogen, will actually start sprouting facial hair in women. But I digress, all right? Androgens and estrogens exert their major influence at puberty. This is when your secondary sex characteristics start coming in, where breast development really starts to occur. Pubic hair, armpit hair, facial hair, all of those things start to grow. That's also, if you remember, when your exocrine sweat glands, your apocrine glands really start to get going as well. Besides the primary sex hormones, the ovaries also produce relaxin. Relaxin is important to remember. Relaxin is a hormone that relaxes and dilates the cervix near the end of pregnancy and also relaxes pelvic and pubic ligaments to prepare for the delivery. If you have too much relaxin, you can start to tear your ligaments just by walking. The ovaries also produce inhibin, the hormone that inhibits follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone after ovulation and during pregnancy. The testes produce inhibin, which controls sperm production. Now we have the pineal gland, the magic gland in the brain. It's a tiny gland inside the brain within the diencephalon and is surrounded by pia mater. I know some people say matter, there's no two T's, it's mater. All the functions of this gland have not yet been identified. All right, it's the mystery. It's the one all of the new age gurus love to talk about because it also deals with our sleep-wake cycle. Serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, histamine, and other neurotransmitters and hormones have all been identified from this gland, but its major function seems to be to secrete melatonin. The gland is light sensitive and is involved with regulating the rhythmic patterns of the body. So that's really cool. In a lot of lizards, you can actually make them go to sleep by petting their head and turning off their pineal gland. Many ancient healing rituals are timed with the rising or setting of the sun. We now understand how sunlight affects body rhythm, and vitamin D, which is produced by our body when skin is exposed to sunlight, can be classified as a hormone. It is very important in the regulation of calcium levels, bone health, immune function, and much more. All right. Not only are we deficient in natural light, we are starved of the dark in modern society. And this can wreak havoc with melatonin production. Exposure to artificial light well beyond the natural cycle, like Mrs. Ellis staying up super late to make these lectures, has influenced the drastic increase in insomnia and disruptive sleep patterns. Our bodies are out of touch with the natural rhythms that they were designed to follow, which puts more stress on our systems. Artificial lights do not provide the full spectrum of sunlight. The incandescent bulbs commonly used in homes primarily provide red wavelengths, whereas the fluorescent bulbs used in many businesses and schools provide yellow-green wavelengths. Animals exposed for long periods to artificial lighting exhibit reproductive abnormalities and an enhanced susceptibility. This is a hard one today for me. Lots of words. Enhanced susceptibility to cancer. All right. So the more that you're in artificial light for your waking hours, and the longer you're in artificial light in what should be your sleeping hours, the more susceptibility to cancer is there. There is also the thymus. The thymus is a gland located deep to the sternum and in the thorax between the lungs. All right, often considered to be part of the lymphatic system and identified as the master gland of the immune system. All right, the thymus is considered the master gland of the immune system. These hormones function in the growth and development of T cell lymphocytes of the immune system. All right. This helps produce T cell lymphocytes in the immune system. All right, what are some other hormones? There are endorphins, which belong to a family of peptide hormones that have many different effects, most notably suppressing pain in a manner similar to that of other painkillers, right? Like morphine. Endorphins influence mood, producing a mild euphoric feeling. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of something called runner's high, but after people jogging or running for such a long distance have muscular teardown, breakdown, they eventually have endorphins coursing through their system and they get pretty giddy and euphoric, and it's called runner's high. All right. There's insulin like growth factor is an important one that stimulates the growth and target cells of insulin, matrix production in cartilage, and growth of fibroblasts in connective tissue. There's erythropoietin that stimulates the production of red blood cells in the bone marrow. Again, we've got to mention the gut and gastrointestinal hormones because it's just so cool that your bacteria actually have a massive role in how you behave, how you grow, how you respond to things, how you feel emotionally, and it has the potential to produce hundreds hundreds of active substances that interact with your endocrine system. The mucosa of the GI tract produces specific GI hormones and releases them when food is present to help regulate digestion as well. These are gastrin, secretin, and cholecystokinin. All right. Cholecystokinin. Don't make me say it fast. Gastrin is produced in the mucosal cells of the stomach and the duodenum, depends, tomato. Most people I talk to say duodenum. Gastrin is produced in the mucosal cells of the stomach and the duodenum, and it stimulates the release of hydrochloric acid and pepsin from the stomach. These are needed to digest proteins. Secretin produced by the small intestine stimulates the release of pancreatic enzymes that digest proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates. All right. Cholecystokinin is produced in the mucosa of the intestine and secreted into the bloodstream, and it releases bile from the gallbladder. And bile is needed to digest lipids, all right, to digest those fats. All right, guys, that is what I have for you today. Have an excellent evening, and I will see you tomorrow.